Answer me this. In your eyes, what does it take to be extraordinary? Does it take money, high standing in society, fame, looks, power? Sure, all those things are great. And I'm sure there's plenty of George Clooney's in the world who would own to those things and surely be considered extraordinary people. But what about things that are a little bit more important than those? Strength, endurance, courage in the face of opposition, giving, selflessness. What about those things? Could they be considered extraordinary? I would say absolutely. And today I want to tell you about someone who is extraordinary. I'll be doing my best to pay tribute to one of the greatest men to ever walk this planet, named William Wilberforce. Wilberforce was an English politician and influential abolitionist in the early 1800s. I'll first be describing his early life. Secondly, I'll describe his walk with Christ and all that meant to him. And lastly, I'll talk about his accomplishments concerning social justice, namely his accomplishment in abolishing the slave trade. So to begin, Wilberforce was born on April 24th, 1759 in Hull, Yorkshire, England. He was a small, sickly child with poor eyesight, and unfortunately, sickness was something that Wilberforce fought his entire life. At 17, he was accepted into St. John's College. He lived a pretty carefree life with no dedicated religion. Biblical principles wasn't really an interest for him at all. He really just liked circulating among social crowds, making friends, and with his cheerful, very vibrant, sweet personality, it was very easy for him to make friends. He was well liked by most everybody he came in contact with. He was a little over 5 feet tall and about 100 pounds, so maybe very unintimidating character as well. At the age of 20, he decided to pursue politics. He entered into a parliamentary election in 1780. He stood for the seat in the House of Commons for his hometown of Hull. He received the seat and thus began a 45-year investment in politics. To move on to his walk with Christ, in the summer of 1784, Wilberforce embarked on a tour with his friend Isaac Milner, who was a convinced Christian. Wilberforce wasn't at this time. He borrowed the book from Milner, The Rise and Progress of Religion in the Soul, by Philip Doddridge. He considered it one of the best books ever written, and later describes it as a huge influence to his own conversion. By 1785, he had gained an excellent understanding of biblical principles, a view of God, and a view of Christ. He didn't proclaim Christianity yet. He kind of pushed it to the back of his mind and wasn't really sure about what to think of it. The next summer, he traveled again with Milner and said that his intellectual ascent suddenly became profound conviction. He was beautifully saved by God's grace, and seeds were immediately sown for a later passion and desire to help the poor and marginalized. His conversion changed nearly everything about him, with the exception of his cheerful, vibrant personality that everybody loved. Beginning not long after his conversion, he would spend time studying the Bible from 9 to 10 hours a day. He consistently memorized the Bible and grew to really adore and cherish it. So it later became clear to him what the Lord had called him to do. He began his lifelong devotion to the abolition of the African slave trade and slavery itself in the colonies, all to the glory of God. He once said this: "God has set before me two objects, the suppression of the slave trade and the reformation of manners." In 1787, he began his fight against the House of Commons in Parliament to abolish slavery. It would be 20 more long, tormenting, hard years for Wilberforce before he would carry both the House of Commons and the House of Lords. One thing that's unique about Wilberforce is his efforts were completely tireless. He never stopped. He never gave up. I'm sure he doubted. He had a hard time. It was a fight for him. But what was more heavy and hard for him to comprehend was the suffering that his fellow human souls were going through. He understood it. He saw it, and it scared him. It frightened him, the pain, the suffering these Africans were going through because of slavery. So he fought for it. He fought tirelessly. Because of what the plantations in the West Indies produced, abolition was absurd to most of Britain, and so it went a long time before he was able to carry, like I said, both the House of Commons and Lords. But finally the time came for the abolition of the trade. After years and years of tried faith the slave trade was abolished on February 24th, 1807. On the 25th of March, the next month, the decision was made to abolish slavery, the official decision, but at this point, the slavery wasn't outlawed in the colonies yet. So on July 26th, a couple months later, 3 days before Wilberforce died, victory was proclaimed. A fellow abolitionist said this: "It is a singular fact that on the very night on which we were successfully engaged in the House of Commons, in passing the clause of the Act of Emancipation, one of the most important clauses ever enacted, the spirit of our friend left the world. The day which was the termination of his labors was the termination of his life." Wilberforce not only gave his life to the abolition of slavery, he invested in several different injustices. At a certain time in his life, he was involved in 69 different initiatives. He was not only seriously dedicated to the trade, he was committed to taking action to bring the alleviation of pain and the greater social good anywhere he saw fit. In closing, Wilberforce in his journey of battling injustice knew very well that it was the interposition of divine providence that gave him the strength and courage to fight. He battled injustice, he ignored torment, he fought his fight and trusted Christ in everything that he did. From the beginning of his Christian life in 1785 until his death, Wilberforce embraced the doctrine of justification by faith alone. This is where he found his joy. This is where he found his effort to continue and to see justice served. J.I. Packer beautifully says this: "William Wilberforce was a great man who impacted the Western world as few others have done. Blessed with brains, charm, influence, and initiative, much wealth. He put evangelism on Britain's map as a power for social change, first by overthrowing the slave trade, almost single-handedly, and then by generating a stream of societies for doing good and reducing evil in public life. To forget such men is foolish." Thank you.